Mustang California Special. This car has an AOD in it. Of course, it came factory with a C4, and the previous owner put an AOD in it, which the current owner dislikes. So he wants to put the C4 back in it, a C4 with a nice converter and a gear vendors, so he has more performance. We're going to take you out for a road test first in the AOD version, which is a very common swap that people do, and kind of give you the feel of what this car feels like with the AOD. And then, of course, we'll put in the gear vendors and C4 and take you for a ride on that. The AOD transmission, of course, people want overdrive, so it's very common for a person to go to his local tranny shop and they build him an AOD and take out that C4. But the C4 was closer ratios. The AOD's wide ratios, has a real low first gear. To the novice performance guy, that sounds like, oh, that's fun, I got a low first gear. But the downside is that means that second gear is farther apart, so it really ruins performance. Every gear in this car you're going to see when we go on a road test is like, into the next gear, into the next gear, with a real drop in engine RPM and performance on each step. If an AOD going in the car was a tenth of the price of a gear vendors, well, it'd be a no-brainer. I guess a lot of people would do it. But typically it ends up being half as much as a gear vendors or 3/4 as much. I've even heard of some people spending as much on an AOD swap as they would have on a gear vendors install. You know, gear vendors is a $2,695 product. If you're getting up anywhere near what the price of a gear vendors is, then it doesn't make any sense at all, because the C4 was one of the best transmissions Ford ever made for performance. And then, of course, the gear vendors is bulletproof and will handle cars with 2,000, 2,500 horsepower, and is fully warranted again, you know, when you go to the drag strip or anything. So it preserves more of the car's originality if we keep the C4 in the gear vendors. There's just no good reason not to do a gear vendors behind the C4. We're gonna take you out for a little road test so we can actually show you the difference in that. Was in its original application, you know, it's a corporate average fuel economy transmission. So in its original application, it was in a fuel injected car with, proper adjusted linkages and all that. And when it worked its best in that stock late model Mustang or whatever that the AOD is from, it still was a less than beautiful transmission because it only had these 3 wide ratios and then overdrive, one tall overdrive gear. What you're going to hear right now is these big drops. It didn't originally come in this car, so no linkage is available, which makes it work as good as it ever did in the late model car. The linkages, the throws on the linkages from the throttle position up at the carburetor to down at the side of the tranny are always some compromise based on the range of what your transmission linkage and your carburetor linkage will do. Under various throttles, it'll work wildly different. If I'm under light throttle right now, let's just say I'm just normal acceleration. That was our 1-2, you felt. And then I'm coming up to speed here, waited a long time to go into third, and then as I let off the gas here, it's into overdrive right away and lugging the motor, which is not our great sound. We'd like to turn it down out of that gear, which means we're going to pull the shift lever down to drive if we're not on the highway. I'm going to do a little bit faster acceleration. You can see how uneven these throttle points are. And there you go. So it was keeping the same steady throttle through each gear. 1, then a long time in 2, then 3, then 4. It kind of drives you nuts when you're out driving it because it's so inconsistent. At times it seems you hit just the right throttle position and you're like, oh, that works, that's really nice. Now, of course, everybody loves overdrive because overdrive makes this car be able to go down the freeway and turn low revs. And so you never hear anybody putting in an AOD that doesn't love it, which is part of what perpetuates people doing this. But the reality is it doesn't work as nice as a C4, nor it have as much performance Now we're going to get on the throttle hard. That was a 1-2. And you see it went into the second without revving up, or went in third gear without revving up, and in the fourth without revving up. Again, this is because of throttle control linkage. So you adjust it, and you try a different fulcrum pointer, make your own little sheet metal fab thing, and you just can never get that right balance. Which is why you see a lot of tranny builders now offering trannies with fixed throttle valves, so that the tranny just always shifts at exactly the same throttle position. It's not affected by your carburetor linkage. But then, when you're on light throttle, it's going to wait way late and drive you nuts. And when you're on hard throttle, it's going to be shifting a little early, because they're going to only just set it to the mid-range. There's just no way to make this thing work exactly right unless you were to, spend $1,000 in engineering on all sorts of little linkage pieces that nobody does, because all the cars and all the carburetors and all the intake manifolds and transmission builds and the springs in the transmission and the vacuum modulator settings are all different. Works really good for cruising down the highway transmission, but that's it. Everything else is a cost to performance. You have all these downsides to the wide ratios that the transmission has and the shifting patterns that it has that weren't present with your C4 or C6 transmission. You loved how it operated, except that it didn't have overdrive, which is the whole point of gear vendors. Give you overdrive behind the best transmission that was available for your car, the best transmission of any one you could get. And in a car like this, the 68 Mustang, there's no better transmission behind this small block than a C4 tranny. It's if you were going drag racing, if you're going road racing, whatever. If you're going to do an automatic, the C4 is the great transmission for it. A lot of people consider this, well, I don't need a gear vendors because, like, out of the box, the normal one's good for like 1,500 horsepower. I mean, why? I'm only making 400. Why do I need a gear vendors? The low horsepower guy actually needs the ratios of the gear vendors more than the big horsepower guy. The big horsepower guy needs fewer gears. He doesn't need to split every gear. The gears are handy because if we got a big cam, big carburetor, blower, all this stuff, and we're driving through town, we can get just the right gear. If we got all these close ratios, we can get just the right gear so that the motor's happy. But the small block guy with small horsepower, he needs the performance that close ratios can give him, because horsepower is an equation of torque times RPM divided by 5252. So you take the torque of the motor times the RPM of the motor's turning divided by 5252, and you have horsepower. When you put it on your chassis dyno or engine dyno, that's all that's happening. That's what's going on to determine your horsepower. And so, like I said, you can make a really strong argument that a small horsepower guy actually needs the close ratios of the C4 gear vendors combination more than a big horsepower guy. And the big horsepower guy is, of course, making too much horsepower for the AOD to live with anyways. I'm going to go up here and hop on the freeway and give you, you probably just heard it just dump into overdrive real early there. Levers D-tips aren't very strong because it's not the factory trans, so the 4-speed quadrants don't line up exactly. And as I'm going down the road, this speedometer is not quite accurate either, because again, it was using what used gears were available. So right now I just crossed the mile marker at point 1, actually a little under 70 miles an hour, even though it's saying I'm doing 70. What we're going to notice if we get a little free space here is just how long it's going to stay in any one gear. It's because the gears are a long way apart. So instead of banging through some short ratios and staying in the power, this thing is going to jump down and then just stay in a gear for a very long time. It's going to stay in this gear till we get to 80 miles an hour. 90. 100. gear, all the way from 70 to 100, because that's the only gear. It goes any lower, it's going to just really wind out too much. And that one gear covers a lot of different space. If you can get it done cheap, go to the wrecking yard. You happen to have a buddy that just wrecked his late model Mustang and it didn't cost you anything, and you got it for darn near free. Well, sure, it's got overdrive and you're going to like it. But if you're going to compare it to a gear vendor's, performance-wise, as we'll show you in our next drive with the gear vendors after we install it, no comparison. A lot more fun, a lot more of a driver's car once we have the gear vendors in it. No better transmission that you could do than just adding gear vendors to it. The AOD was really required by Ford to make because of corporate average fuel economy, to get the low starting gear, and that's the way you get every 1/10 of a mile per gallon you can. With corporate average fuel economy legislation coming in 1981, they had to take off in a super low gear and then dump as quickly as you can into taller ratios. And that makes a fuel-injected car get the absolute best 1/10 of a mile per gallon it can get. And it truly is. You know, overdrive is one of the biggest things that has accomplished fuel economy. But that dumping into, when this car, when you drive it, you feel like right when the motor starts to make horsepower, it dumps into the next gear and takes the horsepower away. It's an exact opposite of what the C4, when it was created, the C6, and you know, GM's Turbo 350, Turbo 400, or Dodge's TorqueFlite 904 and 727, when those transmissions were created, they were about how fast we'd go in the quarter mile, what was the most reliable, how fast we could go, what was the best performing for passing situations, for cornering situations. It was all about performance. The late model overdrive swap tranny is all about getting that extra 1/10 of a mile per gallon. And that'll be evident once we drive the close ratio C4 with the gear vendors, and then make that even closer with splitting the ratios when we wind in the gear vendors. So stay tuned. Give us a call at 800-999-9555 or visit us at gearvendors.com. Hit the overdrive.